Hello, everyone, and welcome back to S&C Sports Talk. I'm Cohen Paxton.
I'm Sean Martino, and this week we'll be discussing the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 and previewing the Final Four.
What's the first game you want to talk about, Sean?
Why don't we start with Alabama versus San Diego State in the South region?
What a game, but I cannot believe the outcome of that one.
I agree. Our predictions were very wrong. If I remember correctly, I called it the least entertaining Sweet 16 matchup of all time, which is
I think we both did.
very bad take, very hot take, obviously. San Diego State played a very good defensive game and shut down Brandon Miller, and Alabama's going home.
Alabama going home in the Sweet 16 was definitely not predicted by lots of people, and definitely not us. We said that Alabama was going to cruise to Houston out of that side of the bracket, and that just didn't happen.
Our bracket is busted.
Our bracket is busted.
And then moving down to the other Sweet 16 game in the South region, Creighton versus Princeton. What'd you think of that one?
I think it kind of held true to the lower ratings of some of the some of the all-time Sweet 16 games. Definitely two lower-end teams. Creighton ended that Cinderella run in Princeton's ended the Cinderella run of Princeton. So I think, like you said, there's not much to talk about that one. Pretty low-rated game.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with Creighton because I did watch some of this game, and Princeton got off to a hot start, was playing very well, but Creighton didn't succumb to the pressure of possibly losing to a 15 seed and ended up just physically dominating them in the second half and pulling away for a nice 11-point win.
They were the first team to actually play their game against Princeton, and it shows that they came up with that win.
I agree. Shout out to Princeton, though. Very nice run.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, so now we're moving into the East, which was at Madison Square Garden. The first game of the night was Florida Atlantic versus Tennessee.
What a dumpster fire for Tennessee. A Tennessee team that looked hot at the beginning with not a great first round against Louisiana, but a great game against Duke, just to lose to Florida Atlantic. A Florida Atlantic team who's played solid all year, though.
Yeah, I mean, Florida Atlantic is obviously pretty underseeded, and I guess should have had some higher expectations. It's a pretty unknown team, but just looking at the stats here, they had a pretty hot shooting game and also shot 18 free throws compared to Tennessee's 11. Completely dominated them on the boards and just played their game and is moving on to the Final Four.
Absolutely. And then next we got Kansas and Michigan State, or Kansas State and Michigan State, excuse me.
Very good game. Very, very good game.
That was an amazing game, yes.
Marquise Norvell was definitely made a name for himself this March. Let's see, he had 20 points in this game. He had the big alley-oop at the end of the game, pointing to Isaiah Thomas in the crowd. Yeah. That'll definitely be a one shining moment this year.
And then we'll head back out to the Midwest, where we got Houston versus Miami.
Oh, I mean, I thought Houston was kind of on thin ice coming into March, but then once I watched their dismantling of Auburn in the second round, I was kind of sold because I thought Auburn was a pretty talented team, but Miami is a team full of athletes, and they just played exceptional against Houston. Isaiah Wong is such a gifted point guard that runs the show for them, and they just have so many guys that can create their own shot, and I mean they shot 44% from three in that game compared to Houston's 3 of 27 in the second half. Houston shot themselves out of that game.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Then we'll head on down to Xavier versus Texas.
I thought it was a pretty run-of-the-mill game. What about you?
I couldn't agree more. It was just a very basic game. It was I don't think there's another low-rating game in my opinion.
A bit of a snoozer.
Then we got Arkansas versus UConn.
Okay, so this was in the West. So I would say I expected a UConn win. I did not expect a UConn win by 23 points. This game was never in doubt and actually probably wasn't as close as the score indicates. I did not watch this game, but I was pretty taken aback when I saw the score because Arkansas with Nick Smith Jr. and just the rest of their good coaching staff, I thought was in a pretty good position to make this a competitive game. But UConn's firing on all cylinders right now. It's probably my pick to take it home this weekend.
Absolutely, and we had very high praise for both teams last week. We talked very highly on both teams, but yeah, that UConn team really just showed out against Arkansas and came away with a big win.
And then obviously the best game of the Sweet 16, and also probably the most anticipated one coming in, was Gonzaga UCLA. What did you think of that game?
I thought that game was amazing. I watched that game. It was back and forth. Just a great game. I think that was that's one of the better games of the tournament I've seen so far.
I agree. It was an electric atmosphere out in Vegas, and UCLA really handled Gonzaga for the first half, but then they tried to speed things up in the second half, and they played at the pace Gonzaga had been wanting them to play at the entire game, and Gonzaga took advantage. And then you have Strother having the confidence to step up and hit that big time shot with 8 seconds left. It's kind of things you can't teach. Definitely injuries played a part in that game. I think if UCLA would have been healthy, it may have been a different outcome, but that is also the harsh reality of the sport.
No, absolutely, and I think that play at the end of the game, that shot that kid hit, is just beyond insane. And not looking past Drew Timme with 36 points.
Yeah.
Dominant performance from him. 16 of 24 from the field and 3 of 6 from free throw line.
I mean, love him or hate him, you can't deny how beneficial he is to that team.
Yeah. The joke about him being there for like 18 years is...
Hey, I mean, he's accomplished more in 18 years there than most guys accomplish in one.
That's true. So now we'll be getting into the Elite Eight.
Okay, so the first one I'm seeing is up in the South, San Diego State versus Creighton. What'd you think of this one?
Tight game.
Yeah, it was a bizarre ending. I was watching this game, and San Diego State hit a clutch foul shot with about 3 or 4 seconds left, if I remember correctly. But the big storyline coming into this game was the two brothers, Adam Sieko for Creighton, and do you remember the other brother's name for San Diego State?
I'll do some digging right here.
Alrighty, well, he's finding that. I mean, they both played very well, and Creighton really dominated the first half, but then San Diego State prevailed, didn't get rattled, and eventually took it by 1 point. And a couple questionable refereeing decisions, but again, like injuries, that's part of the sport.
I'm not seeing his name on the roster.
Well, it was a pretty big storyline, I think. But anyways, then we had Florida Atlantic versus Kansas State.
That is a game that I thought would be truly in the favor of Kansas State, but boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, that FAU team is pretty dang impressive. I think they only have to win 2 more games to pull off one of the biggest shockers in history. But again, heck of a season for Kansas State. I think they'll be around in the Big 12 for a while, and definitely I think Kansas needs to watch out, or else they might get taken over by their neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great game, a 3-point win. You can't ask for much better of a game in March.
In the West, for the right to go to the Final Four was UConn versus Gonzaga.
I mean, what can 82-54?
This was truly a demolition on live television.
A Gonzaga team that beats that UCLA team. Yeah, like we said, missing some pieces in their team, but getting absolutely just blown out in the Elite Eight is insane.
They got blasted. I mean, it was a competitive game, a 7-point game at halftime. You know, I was sitting on my couch at halftime thinking, you know, maybe if Gonzaga just gets a couple more shots to fall or something in the second half, this is probably about a 50-50 game. But then they just got absolutely blitzed in the second half by UConn. I don't know what they said in the locker room, but clearly it worked.
What's the next matchup we got?
Miami versus Texas. This was a pretty entertaining one.
I agree. Yeah, Miami coming away with the 88-81 win over Texas, but that's a Texas team who's been kind of doing all right throughout this tournament, playing fine, not really having any huge scares. The closest game they've played so far was their win over Penn State where they won 71-66. I kind of thought that was going to be another. That was going to be a Texas win, but like you said earlier, that Miami team is full of athletes, and they just proved to be more athletic and come away with that win.
Yeah, I was just surprised to see a mature team like Texas blow a double-digit lead with 8 minutes to go, but that goes to show how good Miami's offense is. I mean, those guys can shoot from anywhere, and they made just enough shots in the first half to keep it close, and I think they were down by about 13 or 14.
That's what I was going to ask.
13 or 14 at halftime.
Was.
But then they were down by 8 at halftime.
Wow.
And then we're down by 11 with 8 minutes to go, but ended up outscoring Texas by 15 in the second half. So that was a heck of an effort with their backs against the wall.
And do we have any more, or are we on to the Final Four?
Looking at my bracket, we're into the Final Four.
All right, so we got the first matchup. We got San Diego State versus FAU. It does not get any more untraditional than that right there.
I agree. I mean, unpopular opinion, I think this goes against the sentiment that most people who watch this tournament have shared, but I'll watch it, but I'm not that excited.
It is crazy to me.
I would rather watch Kentucky, Kansas, or I just all these upsets are just taking my interest out of the tournament a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy. It seems like just the game of college basketball is just going somewhere far from what it's been in the past. I mean, looking at the Final Four, we have a 5 seed, a 9 seed, a 5 seed, and a 4 seed. Like, that is so untraditional.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that UConn was definitely a little underseeded.
I agree.
I'm not surprised to see them there at all, but then FAU was also underseeded, but I don't think anybody can sit here and honestly say that they thought they had a path to Houston. Like you could say with UConn. You could argue with UConn when the bracket was released. You could see a way they could get there. FAU, I thought, wouldn't even make it out of the first round against Memphis, let alone the second round against Purdue, but then Purdue decided to lose to a 16 seed.
Yeah. But so who you got in that San Diego State FAU game?
I'm going with FAU.
I agree. I want to see that the Owls, aren't they? I want to see the Owls bring home that national championship appearance. I think that'd be big for that school. I mean, let's be honest. Do you really hear about Florida Atlantic that much?
The thing that intrigues me about this game is just it's a contrast of two styles. You know, San Diego State is the physical, defensive-minded team. I mean, that defense performance I saw in the Sweet 16 against Alabama was like UVA 2015-esque. That was
lockdown.
Very admirable. But FAU, you know, plays the fast-paced, get up and down the floor. But then, I mean, they showed in their Sweet 16 game against Tennessee, if they have to play at a slower pace, they can still win.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think FAU is going to try to determine the pace of this game, but even if they have to go a little slower in San Diego State's favor, they're already battle-tested against that since they played Tennessee.
Absolutely. I mean, in a way, they're kind of – I think they've done really good at playing to their opponent's game and winning, and then when they can play – if they can play at their own game, I think they're even –
If they can play at their own game, I see this as a 10-plus point win.
Absolutely.
If San Diego State can control the pace, I'm putting it at – I'll say FAU wins by 2 or 3, but it'll be a much more competitive game if San Diego State can control the pace.
And we got Miami versus UConn. Now, I think this is going to be a good game, but I don't think you can look past some of these wins that UConn's come away with early in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Miami, obviously, didn't really expect to see them there. Very talented team, but I don't think they can match up with Sunoco of UConn, the big force inside. I just don't see any size that Miami has on their roster to keep him off the board. So I think UConn should clean up offensively, and unless Miami absolutely blitzes them from beyond the arc, the three-point line.
Which they can do. They're
can.
very capable of doing.
But I still see UConn taking this one, and then I guess that leaves us with a UConn versus Florida Atlantic title game.
And I think that one's kind of set as a UConn win. I think
the magic runs out.
I think the magic runs out, and I think that may be one of the lower rating national championships of all time.
Definitely. I mean, I'll watch because I always do.
Absolutely, national championship.
But man, I won't be sad to see this one end. I'm already looking forward to the 2024 Final Four.
I think I think that this may be one of those national championships that I sit on my phone a lot during. I don't know if there'll be much like intent watch.
Yeah, and maybe next year our hometown team, the VMI Cadets, can finally get to the Final Four. We've been waiting for years.
Also, we kind of looked past it. I would like to point out that I think Alabama has asserted themselves to stay as a football school.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Miami might be asserting themselves to stay as a basketball school.
Yeah.
And then UConn has always been a basketball school.
Yeah.
And San Diego State, I don't really know.
Very unfortunate. We'll be switching over here in a second, but the girls of the Lady Huskies are out of the tournament, so we will not be seeing that double national championship.
What an upset by Ohio State in the women's Sweet 16 on that side. I was surprised to see that because I watched JMU's women's team take on Ohio State in the first round. And JMU was up by 14 at the half, but then Ohio State had an impressive comeback. Then they hit a game winner on the Tar Heels, which I was upset to see in the second round. But then they took down UConn, which, if I remember correctly, UConn has been in every Elite Eight since 2005.
Something like that, probably.
That's incredible.
And then we'll move over to the women's bracket here. We got a number 3 LSU going up against our home state Virginia Tech Hokies. What do you?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people personally who are pretty excited about this run that Virginia Tech has been on, and I think the magic continues, and they're gonna play their way into the title game down in Dallas on Friday night.
Yeah, I think they come home with a win, and that's a strong LSU team. That's an LSU team that's kind of asserted their dominance here recently, and I think the Hokies put it into it.
Yeah, and then I mean also
that may be biased, the home state.
I think the other women's Final Four game is probably a little more intriguing.
Absolutely.
Just due to the fact that you have clearly the best team in the country over the past 2 years taking on I'd say the most famous and I mean definitely the best player in women's college basketball and probably also the most famous in Caitlin Clark, the shooting guard for Iowa.
She is electric. A 40-point triple-double in their last win.
Yeah, she's been something different this tournament.
Yeah, but she's electric. The team's good, but I don't really think you can look past the stats that the University of South Carolina puts up. I just think that I think everyone's kind of playing for second place. If I'm going to be completely honest with you.
I think South Carolina takes down Iowa by about 13 points. Virginia Tech takes down LSU by about 7, and then South Carolina defeats Virginia Tech in a pretty unentertaining blowout.
I think that still is a rather untraditional Final Four in the women's bracket.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, taking nothing away from any of these other teams.
Absolutely.
I mean, phenomenal seasons. But, I mean, UConn just has that winning culture established that schools like Virginia Tech are still trying to build and might solidify.
Was this their first ever Elite Eight and now Final Four?
I believe so.
Yeah, I know it's their first Final Four. It may be their first ever. It may have been their first ever Elite Eight, too, with a pretty steady 10-point win over that Ohio State team that knocked out UConn. So I mean, UConn definitely was not themselves this year, but still, I think that Tech and South Carolina would be a good national championship. But like we said, I think South Carolina kind of comes away with that pretty steadily.
So we have UConn winning the men's national championship and South Carolina winning the women's national championship. And we do not think either national championship game will be all that close.
Yeah, so we got so Friday will be the women's Final Four, and then Saturday's the men's Final Four.
Yep, and then Sunday is the women's national championship game, and Monday is the men's national championship game. So if you're a college basketball fan, this should be an incredible weekend.
Absolutely, we got spring break next week, so you don't have to worry about going to bed. So you just tune into those games.
We do apologize for our rough predictions last podcast. Looking back, we had some takes that obviously did not come true. I picked Arkansas to beat UConn. Arkansas loses by 23. We said San Diego State would get blitzed by Alabama.
We did.
San Diego State beats Alabama.
Yeah, I want to thank all the people who tuned in, and we will talk to you next week.
So take everything with a grain of salt, but we hope you enjoyed it.